I'm Dr. Todd, and I interview magicians. This is Magician's Workshop. On today's episode, we are thrilled to welcome the incredibly talented Erik Tait. Eric is an award-winning magician and comedian whose accolades include winning the International Brotherhood of Magicians Gold Cups close-up competition in 2018 and becoming the first American in 20 years to stand on the podium for card magic at FISM, the World Championships of Magic, where he took home third place in 2022. You may also recognize Eric from his appearance on Penn & Teller Fool Us or from stages like the Magic Castle and Second City Toronto. With a degree in comedy writing and performance from Humber College in Toronto, Eric is the only magician in the world who can academically prove he's hilarious. As a producer at Penguin Magic, he is also responsible for some of their most popular effects, such as Gasp and my personal favorite, Ultra Lucky Coin. So let's dive into the creative process, inspirations, and experiences of a magician who's left an indelible mark on both the comedy and magic worlds. Welcome, Erik Tait.
Hi, Dr. Todd. How are you?
That sounds totally right off the top. That was great.
No, I've been working all day. So the Penguin Magic Holiday Special is about to be released again, and so I've been feverishly editing comedy videos for it. Okay. So that's going to be happening soon. And I just finished my last thing today, so now I get to get back to my regularly scheduled job at Penguin.
I'm so excited to hear that. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit of a Penguin Magic stan.
No, it's okay.
That's the right way to say it.
Yeah, I get it. Look, I was a Penguin Magic fan for a long time before I joined the company, and so it's sometimes it was in there a few days ago with another guy who worked at Penguin, and we were sort of remarking on the fact that we're just like, wow, we can't believe we work here. It's just, you sort of take it for granted sometime. I mean, I kind of got interested in magic when I was like in my early 20s, and Penguin was the big dog in town. I mean, some of my first things I ever bought were things that Oz Perlman had or Jay Noblezada was putting out. And now I'm doing the same thing they were, which is just wild to me. So it's easy to forget how, like the place that you occupy when it's just your day-to-day thing. So,
wow. That actually leads into, you said you kind of really got into it in your early 20s. What was your first memory of getting into magic?
It happened sort of in stages. When I was very young, my father was on a business trip. He brought me with him, and there used to be a series of magic shops that I know David Williamson worked in one at one point, but it had like all this darkwood paneling, and there was 3 or 4 of them across the country. And I'm not saying it was David Williamson. I'm just saying that it was a shop that I know, a chain that Williamson worked in at one point. But in Atlanta, Georgia, we were staying in like some Hilton or Marriott or something, and the magic shop was in there. And my dad took me in as a kid and got me cups and balls and nickels to dimes.
Cool.
And I messed with them, but I didn't really do a lot with them. And at some point in like middle school, I'm sure I took a magic class at some point and did something and kind of forgot about it. But what really got me into magic very seriously was I had learned to juggle in middle school and got a gig at a place called the Comedy Barn in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. And there were all these little sort of souvenir stations that you could go to, and they were all manned by the cast because you're more likely to buy a $30 t-shirt from someone you saw on stage than some sweaty teenager. And when I started working there, the owner said to me, well, you're a juggler. You probably know magic. Go sell magic in our magic shop. And I didn't really know anything. Like I knew cups and balls, and I had a vague idea of the Svengali deck, but I wasn't really like a magician. And there was a ventriloquist who already worked in that station, and his name was Stephen Knowles, and he taught me my first couple of card moves, and I fell in love with the deck of cards, and I've had one in my hand ever since. So I sort of became professional magician, magic pitchman the same day I got really seriously into doing magic. And at that point, wow. I'm juggling on stage in the show, but before the show and during the intermission and after the show, I'm in this little magic shop selling Svengali decks, metal photography, cups and balls, nickels to dimes, hot rods, just, your staples in magic, invisible deck, all that stuff. And so I was really working and learning how to pitch and perform those tricks at that time. And so I would say that is really when I became interested in magic.
Wow. So you're in your 20s, you're learning magic. What were your early influences? Like, Leonard Green, who you've worked with. Is there anyone like that you had early on?
Well, so Leonard Green was an early obvious influence, but not because of like his DVDs. It had more to do with the World's Greatest Magic specials that were on NBC. And I was on another podcast hosted by a British magician, where we would watch like magic specials together and then like re-talk about them.
Cool.
Alexander McAleer is who runs that, and we watched one of the early World's Greatest Magic specials, and one of the things that sort of brought me back when I rewatched that special was it's hard to remember, but that was like the heyday of must-see TV. There was you couldn't watch video on the internet because your modem was 56K if you were lucky.
Right.
There was no streaming services, anything like that. And the World's Greatest Magic specials came out on Thanksgiving, and so those were like huge must-see TV events.
Oh, I watched them. I had them all on tape.
Yeah, and everyone saw them. And so when I got back into magic, it was very much me remembering, oh yeah, remember those magic specials? Like, I wonder what's going on with those magicians now. So Leonard Green was one that stuck out in my mind. Juliana Chen was one that stuck out in my mind.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, like Michael Amar, Daryl, Matt King. A lot of them, my early influences were from that. There was a magic shop like a proper magic shop in Gatlinburg that I would end up working at one point, and some of my first purchases were at like the L&L DVDs. So Troy Hoosier's Total Destruction series was an early one. I did end up getting Leonard Green's Green Magic very early on in my learning magic, but then a lot of the Penguin stuff, Born to Perform Card Magic, a lot of the early downloads that I would end up 20 years later going on to refilm. So Red Hot Mamacita, Mambo Number 5, a lot of those early Os Perlman transposition, I think, were things that I was doing 20 years ago. And then much later on, I would come back to do them. So it's all went full circle in a way that I could never have predicted. So those were the early stuff. And of course, a lot of the early illusionist stuff too. It's hard to understate how influential illusionist was in the very early days of magic and the internet. I mean, so I had the Crash Course series. I had the Street Magic Volume 1 and Volume 2 with Brad Christian. Those were pretty early influences on me. So a lot of like that era where you had, Blaine was on TV, Chris Angel was on TV, Copperfield wasn't so much on TV anymore, but it was a lot of the street magic stuff. And so that was sort of influencing what people were seeing. And that was the very early stuff, but it was always like a very close attraction to cards. My first magic book, my first proper magic book, was I bought in a used bookstore, and I didn't realize what I had at the time, but it was Expert Card Technique by Hugh Garden Browie, and it happened to be a first edition that I still have to this day.
What a find!
I got it for like $25. It's not in great shape, but I read it cover to cover, and there's still stuff I do out of there. So that's a lot of like the early stuff was just, sort of taking it in like a fire hose from the internet, DVDs, and some lucky finds in used bookstores. In the early days, like, Illusionist was king. They had the really hot marketing. They had the big email list. I mean, they had a commercial that like aired like during the David Blaine special. It was huge. It was impossible.
Wow.
If you were getting into magic in those days, you knew about them.
Wow. I was in you ever remember the Black Club?
Oh, of course I was a member of the Black Club.
I still have some of my sheets from that.
Oh, I've still got the actually, I just talked about this on the Penguin Magic podcast not too long ago. I have in my collection an unopened brick of sealed first edition Black Tiger cards. Yeah. So
I wish I bought more of those. I only have one.
Lord knows how much those are worth, but I one of my first smoke devices I got in trade for those cards. So yeah, I
Nice.
mean, I've been around for a while. I'm definitely part of that generation that sort of the DVDs and VHS was sort of on its way out, and downloads and digital stuff and the internet was on the way in. So I'm one of those cusp people who had both and was learning from both.
Awesome. Um, what, and I know you've done it all: restaurant magic, parlor magic, now large stage magic. Do you have a favorite venue that you like to perform at?
I mean, my favorite venues in the world are the close-up gallery at the Magic Castle, the 654 Club at the Chicago Magic Lounge, and of course the P3 Magic Theater, because we built that from the ground up for magicians to be in there. I love doing close-up. I love doing like a formal close-up show where I'm not having to, I cut my teeth at Magicopolis back in the day doing the bar stuff, and that was always fun, but you kind of had to also keep the bar flowing and make
Hmm.
sure you were making tips and money, and everything kind of had to be modular. And I love doing my stage shows. I love doing my full 45 minutes in Mystique. I love doing the stage in Nashville at House of Cards. I love doing the big stage in the Blackstone Theater at Chicago Magic Lounge. I love all the big stages. And I much prefer to do like sort of my big stage show, because I think my sort of full 45-minute hour show is arguably more powerful than some of my close-up stuff. But then, there's something to be said about the restaurant that I work in every week, Town Hall here in Columbus, and just going table to table and doing little three trick sets and just rocking people's world is super fun. Uh, it's Do I have a favorite venue? I mean, the close-up gallery in the castle will always have a special place in my heart. But also, when I went full time, the 654 Club was the very first theater that I played when I moved out of sort of corporate regular person world and into like full-time magic. And so there's always something that when I walk into that theater that I'm like, oh yeah, this is kind of where my life changed forever. So it's hard to say if there's a favorite one, because they've all got special meaning and there's things I like about them in different ways.
So you said kind of when you left corporate life, what was your life before full time magic?
I worked in the plastics manufacturing industry, knowledge of which gets frequently used and brought up at Penguin
Wow.
when we're manufacturing stuff. I come from my family spent a long time in the extrusion industry. So think of like a straw. It's a
Hmm.
continuous process. And so I did a lot of different stuff in that. I was in supply chain for a while, marketing. I was in the innovation group, so I would work with developing new materials and new technologies. And I've done. I was in plastics for right around 9.5 years. After I did that, I was doing a lot of stuff in my youth. When I was younger and out of college, I was in Los Angeles. I was trying to make it a go as a stand-up comic. I was trying to do a thing as a television writer and a film writer and work in the television and film
Wow.
industry. And none of that ever really caught. And also like I was young and not good and and a terrible human being. And so like
As
in
we
your
all were.
yeah, I mean, like could only be described as in my early 20s. I was no fun to
Yep.
be around, and thought I was, God's gift to everything. So I had to be creatively kicked to the teeth and brought down a peg, and learn to be humbled. Uh, and so I'm so thrilled that a lot of my friends from that era of my life are still my friends.
Nice.
But I worked in the cell phone. I sold cell phones for Verizon. I was a bank teller for a while. But
Oh,
a
wow.
lot of my professional life in the manufacturing industry was spent in plastic extrusion, working and building products and things of that nature. So I know way too much about plastic.
Okay. That's awesome. You worked in the extrusion industry and I worked in the extraction industries. Now you've been on national television. Penn and Teller's Fool Us. How has that changed your career?
What's interesting is, as popular as that show is, it's also important to remember that uh, people have such a varied media diet these days that they often don't see it or remember it for a while. Uh, like I want to say 6 or 7 weeks after I was on Fool Us, I was traveling to go to the Tricks convention that Scott Robinson runs in Raleigh, North Carolina, or Charlotte, one of those two, in North Carolina. And I was in an airport bar, and I was messing around with a deck of cards, and a guy goes, "Oh, do you watch the show Penn and Teller Fool Us?" And I said, "Oh yeah, yeah, I do." And he goes, I was watching it a few weeks ago and I saw this guy in there and he had these 3 cards and he made him disappear and reappear. And it was just really wonderful. And I was like, but basically the guy described my own trick to me. And I was like, oh yeah, that was me. And he was like, oh, and it was you. So it was, I've had someone describe my own effect to me in an airport bar without realizing it was me. So it's not like it made me more recognizable. It definitely cemented some things for a lot of magicians in the real world where they were like, oh, who is that guy? He's doing sort of difficult sleight of hand. And it gave me a lot of confidence to do certain things that I probably would have never done earlier on. Like I never would have gone out for the IBM competition if I hadn't filmed Penn and Teller Fool Us. In my professional career, the one thing it really definitely did was opened a lot of doors for theaters where they were like, oh, if he can be on national television, he can probably handle our theater. And 2, with my corporate clients, it sort of made discussion about price kind of stop. So if I was charging more for a corporate client and I would say, well, I was on Penn and Teller Fool Us, it wouldn't give me the ability to charge more, but it just sort of made them go, oh, he is worth that price and either I can afford this or I can't. And so it was not a like, well, we were thinking about this much. Like that still happens, but it happens less when you've got sort of the credentials that I do. But I don't think that's limited to Fool Us. I think that there's a lot of things that do that for people at some point in their career where you end up with enough credentials that people just kind of stop negotiating with you.
Got it.
But it happened to me earlier. So is what I would say.
That's
and it
cool.
just it made me more recognizable at like magic conventions and in the magic industry for whatever that is worth.
Well, your beard is now, I think, iconic amongst the magic community. I mean, I see your face on Penguin. I know immediately who we're looking at here.
The secret is it's actually Eugene Berger's stunt beard. So
got it. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not actually. It's strapped on around the ears. So
have you gotten his? I only got part 1 of From Beyond. Did you read the second Eugene Berger?
I have not. Eugene is one of those who I have a lot of his theory that I've listened to. There was a series of tapes called Growing in the Art of Magic that I had digitally converted that I've listened to a number of times. But I am sadly lacking in a lot of his close-up work, unfortunately, for reasons that just don't escape me. I think part of it is because he was doing a lot of bizarre magic, at least at the time that I knew he was, and that stuff just doesn't interest me.
Yeah, his live Penguin Live was very it was just Eugene Berger being himself, and it's just, if you love that kind of thing, led you to join Penguin Magic. How did that come about?
There's a lot of people who ask me, hey, how do I get a job at Penguin? And the part of the real secret behind it is you need to have 2 skill sets that are very unusual for people. One is to be a magician. Preferably a knowledgeable one and have some performing experience. But the other, truthfully, is if you want to be involved with Penguin or really any magic production company, you need to be good with a camera, understand how to edit video or take photos. Long before I joined the team at Penguin Magic, I got pretty fascinated with photography, and I do, at least I did for a while. Now I use a camera every day, so it's less of a thing that I engage in. But I've done a lot of wildlife photography. I've traveled through jungles in South America, taken photos of parrots and monkeys and eagles and bugs and stuff. Every time I go on a trip, I take my DSLR camera. And I enjoy editing the photos and making them look as good as possible. I have a Flickr account that I post to occasionally. And then my animals in my home, I'm constantly taking photos with. And I do more like mobile photography with my phone these days because phone cameras are crazy these days. But I still love the act of going out and taking a photo, bringing it home, processing it, and then sort of publishing it. And so for a number of years before I worked with Penguin, I was working with a camera a lot. And I was doing a lot of experimental stuff too. I got pretty fascinated by GoPros. And so I would make weird GoPro videos. I do have this background in stand-up and sketch comedy. And I had a group of people that I worked with and we made comedy videos. And, they weren't like super high budget or anything, but I had a working knowledge of how to use most editing software. because I was the one who was interested in editing the videos and mixing sound and doing things like that. So when Penguin, there was a time when Penguin like lost a couple of people for various reasons. They went off to other careers and wish them the best. They're still friends, but they needed people. And Nick, who was a friend of mine at the time, was like, "Well, Eric does videography and photography and is a pretty good magician, and also he knows like internet stuff. And I think he's pitched magic before. Why don't we talk to him?" Uh, and so it was a very quick like. I got thrown some footage. They asked me to cut together a demo and a tutorial as like an audition. So I did a couple of those, and the next thing I knew, I was on board with the team.
Wow.
And the other people that I've talked to in various magic companies, it's a similar story. They are people who they have two very distinct things that they like. One of them is magic and the other is photography and videography. If you talk to any of the guys over at Vanishing, those guys are great. Those guys are great videographers, great photographers, and have been well before they got into magic, right? And it's the same with people over at Murphy's, the people who are actually producing the videos and stuff. I mean, you've got people who are knowledgeable about magic and knowledgeable about producing stuff. I mean, even as we're sitting here in this video, like I'm sitting in like a home broadcast studio with multiple cameras and lights and this stuff all like matters so that I can produce high quality stuff from home for Penguin. And it's not just about doing the tricks, it's about putting together the final product. And then once I got involved with Penguin, it really became the crash course in like, what do we think of as the customer experience? And that's what I've spent the last 6 years or so really diving into and getting my arms around, figuring out how to make tutorials better, how to advance the way we teach magic. And whenever I am approaching a product from the very beginning, I have to think about the product as though it was somebody's very first magic trick. So if maybe they came to Penguin from a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad, or they saw us on TikTok, or, Nick did something crazy on Instagram and that is like what led them to Penguin. And they were like, I want to do that. When you receive the product, right? Because it's not just about catering to the magic community that exists. It's about catering to the potential magic community that could exist, and the people who are sort of the next generation and who are going to be the next Darren Browns, the next David Blaines, the next David Copperfields, because everyone has to start somewhere. And if you don't have a good experience on the ground floor, then you're not going to become more knowledgeable and interested in magic. And so that's really where I am right now. So sometimes, like if you get a Penguin product and I'm explaining to you like an Elmsley counter, or a second deal, or not a second deal, but like a double lift or something, and you're like, oh, this is baby stuff. It's not because I'm trying to speak down to you. It's because the person next to you might need to know that stuff. And so structuring the tutorials in a way that can make it great for an existing customer, but also a positive experience for someone who's never who's never done a magic trick before, is really important. And that's all, it's more than you asked, but that's like where it came from. And then like what I started to focus on when I got involved with the company.
So that is a really good way to look at it.
I think that one of the things that is sort of lost in current magic culture is the teaching of the art, because I try not to name drop or anything, but I've been very fortunate to work multiple conventions with Michael Amar now, and also interview him multiple times, not just on the Penguin Magic podcast, but also we've been on conventions where he's been asked to do a Q&A, and then he goes, well, Eric is here. Why don't you just have Eric do the Q&A because he knows the right stuff to ask me? And it's just, I think we've done that like on 3 or 4 conventions together now.
That's awesome.
And, it's not like we get booked together. It just kind of happens. And Amar was one of those ones who really impressed upon me when I was talking to him about how important the teaching process is, and how important it is to like be considerate and thoughtful and deliberate when you're setting up your lessons. I actually come from a long line of teachers. My mother was a teacher. Her mother was a social worker who worked in the education system. And I went through the Montessori teaching philosophy when I was young, like right up until high school. And so it's for me, it's not just about teaching you the effect, it's also teaching you how to teach yourself to learn other stuff. And so those are the things that I'm trying to incorporate into these lessons, is to take these other styles and methods of teaching and bring them to the magic community in a way that will leave it better than I found it.
And I wanted to get into a little bit about the website and how that works. Even every time I look at that website, it's got this sheer amount of mass of products. If I'm starting it as a new hobby and I get to that website, what do you kind of suggest I start?
So the first thing you need to do is, when you go to the top of the website, there's a place where you can get free tricks if you put your email address in there. Now, obviously, we want your email address so we can send you emails and tell you about new products and things like that. But you do get this, pretty well thought out video from, I think Rick Lax put the original one together. I know we're working on a new one to sort of update it. But there's some great tricks in there, some card tricks, some coin tricks. I think Fizzmaster is taught on there. It's a Paul Harris trick where the bubbles vanish from one shaken soda can and then reappear in another unshaken soda can. It's a really cool idea.
That's cool.
But so that's the first thing, is that you get some very easily accessible tricks there. There are search tags that are like different categories for like beginner tricks and things like that. But I will also tell you that we are actively hoping to update the website, soon-ish. I can't give you a drop dead date for that, because we do get questions about the email a lot, because it looks a little antiquated. It looks a little on the older side, and there are certain features that you can't do, like filter out tricks that are sold out. And part of that is just because when you get a catalog that is that large and have all of those reviews that are in there and the history and the data, there's a lot that goes into that, and this isn't an excuse for why the website hasn't been updated with features like that. It's just sort of an explanation. One of the things I did in the manufacturing world in the past was I moved a company over from one ERP system to another. That's enterprise resource management. So that's how sales or like purchase orders are entered, and then that creates work orders and bills of material for the manufacturing group to bring, and then the packaging team gets it all together and then shipping out. It's pretty sophisticated software, and if you don't move over in a thoughtful way, you can destroy a company overnight. Many industries are replete with companies being destroyed overnight by changing software. And when you think about some of the greatest repositories of magic knowledge of all time, the Magic Cafe is another one that I think of. That the Magic Cafe has been around for a long time, and it looks, old, right? But imagine the monumental task of trying to move that over to a new system that's more easily searchable, right, easily indexed. I mean, that's a colossal task for anyone. And it's kind of the same with Penguin, because every product that's on there, almost every product, has tons and tons of reviews, and people read those reviews, and they matter and make sense. And then you're also moving over video, not just the tutorials, but the demos and all kinds of other things. And that is a very, very big task that has been underway for years to get right. And so it's, there's so many things, and we want to get it right before we do anything to update it. So, and we've made various updates. Like, I don't think people realize this. You can watch demos and tutorials in 1080p on our website. You used to not be able to do that. You used to only be able to watch it in 360, not even 720, only 360. So like these little tiny videos. but it's all in full high definition now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of little incremental changes that we've been able to do. When we broadcast the Penguin Magic Awards, or when we do like a live stream for Black Friday, there's a lot of incremental changes that we've been able to add to the website over the years. But very large global changes have been harder to do because of the things that I just talked about. And so it's easy to say, make your website function differently or work differently, but it's very difficult in practice to actually do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it is something that we're thinking about and wanting to get on board with. It's not an excuse. It's to try and because that was one of the first things I said when I joined. I was like, what about this? And then someone broke everything down for me and showed it to me behind the scenes. And I was like, oh, this is a way bigger task than I thought.
It's a lot of video.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot. Probably a lot of moving parts too, because you're selling things. You've got online video.
Yeah. It's a huge task. So it's definitely one of those things that we're working on. And we've told people hey, it's coming. Can't tell you when, but it's definitely something we want to do.
When you're coming up with a new product like Ultra Lucky Coin, which by the way, absolutely kills at every single restaurant that I've been to. It is such a brilliant idea. And it's enough to where I go and I'm like, why didn't I think of that? It's so genius. Where does that come from?
I don't think many of my ideas are very clever. I often view my own methods as super brute force, and I'm just people can see through this. And then the magician crowd likes it, and they're like, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. I don't know how. My buddy John Armstrong has a great quote in one of his lectures where he says, people ask me how I come up with great stuff, and I go, it's really easy. I just steal from dead people. And that's not far off, but I just wait until they're on their deathbed. No, so there's sort of two different questions you're asking me there. One is, how does a product come to be with Penguin, especially when I'm involved with it or Nick is involved with it, and then how do I come up with my own stuff? And those are two very different answers, because if you kind of look at my own stuff, I don't actually have that many products out. I have a fair number of downloads because I screw around with cards all the time, and I'm constantly working on little things, or I'll sort of improvise at the restaurant and they go, oh, this is kind of neat. And then, we'll end up with that. Ultra Lucky Coin came out of, I did the Lucky Coin plot a lot. John Armstrong had advanced the plot quite a bit. And then I had it in my head that I wanted to do it twice. And I was trying to make little tiny flap cards. That was a complete fool's errand. And then I somehow caught on to the idea of magnetizing it and having the little cover piece. And at the same time, Lecapo was working on Lucky Coin as well, but he had a different route because he was using the fine print thing. But we've essentially had the same effect. And so I showed him mine, he showed me his, and we kind of got together and said, oh, let's market this. And we put my name on it because at the time he was working for Penguin. I didn't have any releases. And so we just he was a silent partner for a while, but now it's more known that it's very much we split everything on that 50-50. Cause that's a very much there's a lot of him in that a lot of people don't realize. Gasp was a little bit different. I was doing Mr. Lifto by Ryan Schlutz for a long time, which is a version of the magnetized cards that uses a secret magnet and shimmed card. And I liked that, but I kept sticking to microphone stands. And so I wanted to get rid of my PK ring, and I didn't want to wear a secret magnet. And so I was in a performer's condo for a weekend, and I was like, well, what if I could use one card to actuate the flap, and then how could I get the flap to close? And I'm not really much of an arts and crafts guy, but over the course of a week, the thing came together. And I mean, I bought so many different stupid little arts and crafts things while I was in Utah when this happened. And the addition of the roughing spray was sort of the final thing that brought it all together. And I started doing it in the show that week, and it worked. And then I had to kind of work backwards to get a close-up version of it, because the parlor version was mainly what I wanted it for. And then I showed it to the team, and they were all like, oh, this is great. We should definitely turn this into a product. Because they know I think I did it in a show at the theater, and someone was like, you're not wearing your PK ring. How'd you do that? And I showed it to them, and they were like, oh, that's new. And so it didn't really occur to me that it would be a real thing until the rest of the creative team looked at it. With the products that come to Penguin, if you ever see me, teaching or performing something that doesn't have my name on it, there's a couple different reasons why that might happen. The person may not be interested in being on camera, may not want people to know who they are. English may be their second or third language, and so the teaching and performing can get pretty tough. Or they just schedule doesn't work out, so they can't get there. Or they want me to present it. Sometimes people are like, "Oh yeah, please do this." Or we'll get all the way done filming something and then realize like, oh man, we need to add like this, that, or the other to the tutorial to make it a really complete experience. And so then myself or Nick will get brought in for what we like to think of as like wraparound services, where because we're a touch point with the customer, when you see us, it's this is something that came up after all of the main shooting was done, and we want to make sure that you have a complete experience. And a lot of times it happens with people who English is their second language, where we'll have to add something else sort of late in the game. And you get to the end of producing a project and you go, oh, we missed this wildly obvious thing. Because when you're like in the middle of producing and, filming and directing and performing it, and you're just like, the best laid plans, what is it? Patton says no plan survives first contact with the enemy. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I got to the end of it and I was like, we totally forgot to film this stupid thing, which is like super crucial, but easily overlooked. And so a lot of that is just part of it is experience and doing it over and over again and becoming a generalist. And, I have a very large magic library downstairs in my house that I'm constantly using for reference as I'm going through things. If I need to add credits to something, or if I need to research a particular plot that we're working on. But a lot of the stuff is the products that we put out are mostly created by people outside of Penguin, and they submit the ideas to us so that we can produce it and bring it to market. And so they're not, it's 90% of the stuff that we put out is not internal ideas. There's actually very few internal ideas. And that's the same for most magic production companies. It's an internal idea when you see it's like, this thing by Penguin Magic. Okay, the team came up with that together as a product. Like we were kicking stuff around the office and that came together. But if it's got somebody's name on it, then it's probably an individual creator's thing.
Okay. How do you usually take your submissions?
So there's only two things that are critical. Is we need a video that is a performance and a video that is an explanation, and it can be super rough prototypes. I can't tell you how many times someone has sent something to us that is like they've roughed cards themselves with like a grip stick or just using sticky back tape, and they've crudely drawn on blank cards like what it is, or they've made a wallet idea out of felt. And they're like, obviously this would all be leather in the final thing, but this is sort of like how it all works. We've had very, very rough stuff sent through. It goes through, there's a couple of filters that it goes through. There's a couple of people who read every submission and they look at the videos, they watch them. If they think there's any merit to it, they submit it to a core group on our creative team. And that is made up of a wide range of magicians who have a wide range of knowledge. People who are card experts, coin experts, mentalism experts, stage, parlor, close-up, gimmick makers, all a very wide range. And you wouldn't believe the amount of stuff that gets shot down because somebody looks at it and goes, oh yeah, this is basically just a variation on an old idea from Ken Krenzel or an old idea from Pat Page, and it's nothing against the creator. We all kind of sometimes we do parallel thinking. We end up at the same idea, and there may be slight differences or that, but there's a lot of well-read people on the team for that reason, so we can avoid bringing something all the way to market and then going, oh crap, this was put out by Troy Hoosier in the 80s. So there's a lot of stuff that gets knocked down at that point. And that team looks at anywhere from 3 to 5 videos a day. I mean, we get a lot of submissions, and people think that there's a lot of merit in a lot of the stuff that comes through. And there's everyone puts in their input, and then we at the end of the day, the sort of the production staff ends up, and the management ends up picking the stuff that they think will be good to bring to market, and then we enter into a deal with someone, and then at that point it ends up coming across my desk, and then also coming across Seth Raced's desks. Seth is the head of our manufacturing team, and so he'll look at it and work to get it from rough idea to workable prototype, and he'll work with the artist to get that prototype to the final phase for manufacturing, and then I'll take a copy of it out and road test it in the real world to make sure that we're not missing anything, because there's a lot of magicians who create things and they miss pretty simple stuff like, hey, if I walk up to a group of people, how do I actually get into it? And so that's a lot of the time I'm going like, oh, like, there was not too long ago I was like, hey Seth, you have to walk into the thing with this set up, and he was like, oh. And so we worked to fix it, and it was just, you miss little things like that, but that's why we have a very rigid isn't the way, but it's like a very task oriented process to make sure that we're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's to make sure that when the final thing gets to you, it was tested by somebody in the field to make sure that it would A, get a good reaction, B, you can actually do the trick, and then C, it was like made by a magician in Columbus, Ohio. So if you're getting a physical product, it was manufactured or quality controlled by a magician who would use it, so they know what they're looking at. This isn't some manufacturing associate in China who has no magical knowledge. This is somebody who has magical knowledge that is looking at it and knows what it's for, and so that's why we have a pretty low instance of returns. I'm not saying quality control stuff doesn't escape our production facility occasionally. I mean, we're mass producing stuff, but we have a very, very low return rate on stuff like that because of the way it's all produced and it goes through that. So I hope that sort of answers your question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also, I want to go touch on the kind of made by magicians for magicians kind of concept, because you said that during the Dragon Scale podcast.
Yeah.
How common is that, where you're not just drop shipping stuff, where you're actually making it at your location by people that are testing it, making sure that it works?
It's super uncommon to my knowledge. Now, I can't speak for any of the other production houses out there, and obviously like individual creators who are making stuff like in their garage and packaging up themselves, like that's a different story. But to my knowledge, there's no other like workshop that is happening where, at our scale anyway, at least, because there's a lot of people who are making stuff entirely over in China, and then it gets brought over here and put all together, or it's made in India, or it's made by people who are not magicians. Like maybe it's made in the U.S., but it's made by somebody who's not magicians. To my knowledge, we are the only workshop that is doing that, where it's made in the U.S., it's made domestically, it's made by an employee of the company, and that, by the way, doesn't just extend to little things like flap cards. I mean, that extends to like arcade coin, like custom gaffed coins that are being manufactured in-house by a Penguin Magic employee. Like, we got people back there who are machining down actual currency into proper coin gaffs. So it's, obviously there's stuff that when you can take steps out of the process, right? Like if you're making a gaff deck and you're having it printed by the United States Playing Card Company, a magician isn't touching every single one of those unless they've got to go on, spray them with Plastidip or, take them out. But like, there's a lot of stuff that you can get like already set up. But, even then there's quality control that is going through the magicians. They're spot checking stuff, making sure that things were shipped correctly. And, mistakes happen, but I think we've got a lot of good processes in place to stop it.
I mean, so how often do you let Roddy McGee get out to get treats? I mean, or is he just in the cage, like making little magic doors the entire time?
Oh, Roddy is not working with us anymore. He's got his own company called Trick Trick Boom, and so he's doing a lot of stuff over in the UK by himself these days. So he's no longer a Penguin employee, but we still carry Trick Trick Boom products. And so the answer is Roddy is allowed out of the cage whenever Roddy wants to allow himself out of the cage.
Nice.
Craig Petty, on the other hand, we have thoroughly locked up
Yeah,
under
he
lock
is.
and key. Yeah.
He is never leaving. I'm surprised. I think you let him out to go to the bars to do get tricks so he can get some
But
fresh water.
but we have an ankle monitor on him, and he's chained to the camera operator, so it's
Smart.
all good. Yeah.
Have you ever had a mentalist come to you before you got the letter to tell you that you shouldn't do the trick?
Not yet, but I wish they had on a couple of them. No, there's, I have a well-known aversion towards mentalism for a wide variety of very stupid reasons. But no one's ever like come to us and been like, oh yeah, this is going to fail, and then it did. It's always a surprise at what is like a real swing and a miss, and what is like, oh, this is just going to be like, we're going to put it out and no one's going to notice, and then it like completely blows up and is like the biggest thing in Magic ever. You never really know. I mean, like we like to think we have a good track record and pay attention to that stuff, but every once in a while you get surprised. So,
well, I remember you were saying you read like every review. The team reads every review that comes in. How much of that your time does that take up? Because there is a lot of products.
It's a lot when a product drops, and a lot of that, like reading the reviews, is important to figure out what we did right and what we did wrong. There was, Arcade Coin's a really good example where I was reading a lot of scuttlebutt on the Magic Cafe, and I even like chimed in and asked them. There were a lot of people who were upset that Arcade Coin didn't come with an ungimmicked arcade token. And that confused me a lot because, I mean, I sold scotch and soda in a brick and mortar Magic shop, and no one ever was like, well, I need an ungimmicked $50. Right, because like that just didn't. No one ever brought that up. But they were like, "We need an extra centavo," and like this is like what comes in the Arcade Coin package is almost identical to what has been shipped with Scotch and Soda for decades. And some people brought up like, "Oh, the Arcade Coin is like kind of a weird looking coin, and there's a lot of different versions of it. So if I wanted to not switch it out, but to continue the effect and do other things, well." We told people where to find, the exact. We were able to tell people like the exact kind to look for if they wanted to do that. Or there, there's been interesting things that have come up with other stuff that is just, you just don't see it coming. Or then people are like super over the moon about something that you didn't even realize was something that they wanted to put in there. So it's important to read all that stuff. And we're not like holding back reviews or anything like that, or deleting stuff, unless it's like very obviously like somebody trolling and like they haven't obviously haven't purchased the product and they're just like out to like, be a jerk because they don't like this magician. Like that's a different story. But like, if it's a verified purchase and the review's a bad review, we let them post it. We're not hiding that stuff.
So I guess you got to get ready for reviews of the new bottle cap trick of people saying, "Why doesn't it come with the soda?"
Yeah, I think Cap Size is coming out again. It's being re-released with an update to the way the gimmick works. And there are people who are going to be upset that it doesn't seal when you put it on a soda, but and like the bottle can leak, but. You have to sacrifices have to be made so that you can do the actual effect.
I get the emails from HR. Is he coming up with those jokes? I don't want to like spoil it or anything, but I really like those dad jokes.
Some of them are ones that he comes up with. Some of them are stuff that he gets from Reddit groups of dad jokes. It's a mix. It's a mix of stuff.
That hurt me more than anything else you could possibly say.
The blue wall is fake. It's a piece of spandex over plywood. It's not real. Sorry. Are there any other dreams I can crush?
Spandex.
Yeah,
I'm actually hella impressed.
It's an 18-foot tall piece of spandex that is slowly deteriorating, which is why you don't see it very much anymore.
Well, actually, I do want to talk about the P3 Theater, because I just think that is like a really clever idea.
Yeah, the theater is our production studio. It's where we film all the tutorials. It's where we film a lot of the live shows when we're doing like parlor or stage stuff. Every once in a while, we film in the magic shop that's out front, or we'll film in our little cocktail area when we're not when we get a little lazy and we don't want to go out to a bar or restaurant, or it's super cold and snowy and rainy in Columbus. But we've been there for well over a decade in that same space. It's just been remodeled a number of times. And the blue wall is still there, but it's spandex velcroed to a wall in this like brick archway type thing. It's the Velcro wears out and it's starting to fall down. And Dan Harlan actually made the blue wall, and none of us know.
I'm not surprised at all
how he did it. So we're like, one of these days we have to because it used to go up and down. So there was a time where we would take it down so that we could use the black backdrop, because it was a black like wall that we could sort of throw uplights on. And if you did stuff with the camera, it looked really like cool, like with a bit like 50% gray almost. And the problem is that taking that wall up and down sort of wore on it over time. And so now we try not to take the blue wall down ever, but we have these nice black crushed velvet curtains that cover it now in the most recent remodel of the theater.
Let's get into Penguin Live, because that's actually the nearest and dearest to my heart. Is there any other performer that's your favorite act that you've had on Penguin Live?
I don't really have like a favorite performer that we've had on. I have like favorite moments from over the years. There's over 450 live lectures now. Dan hosted more than 300. I've hosted over 100. And there's been 11 total hosts over the years. And so Dan and I are far and away the ones who've hosted the most. I definitively remember Jeremiah Zuo's coin lecture. As Dan is notably not terribly a fan of most coin magic, and Jeremiah was coming in to do a coin magic lecture. And we were a little worried about it because Dan's a pro, but we also were like, well, Dan's not a big fan of coin magic. We'll see how this goes. And Jeremiah immediately just made Dan fall in love with his coin magic. Wow. And at the very end of the lecture, Dan hops up and goes, "Gotta be honest, Jeremiah, not really a fan of coin magic. Wasn't expecting to see anything good today. This is the best damn coin lecture we've ever had here. That was amazing." I mean, it was really something to see, because he really changed Dan's opinion of coin magic in that time. Seeing Dan host Mario the Maker Magician, being there when Chris Philpott had Dan cut the penguin's head open to find a card inside of it. I've been there for so many incredible moments, and Carissa Hendricks's lecture is unreal, and her and Dan talking about plot structure and performance and building stuff is really amazing. And then in the lectures that I've hosted, like getting to host Christopher Carter was super cool. Like, even though I'm not like a huge fan of mentalism, Christopher Carter's thinking is whip smart and super incredible. And he's got stuff that you can apply to your own stuff, your own magic. Daniel Chard's lecture has got some card work that has inspired my own stuff. Let's see. Hosting John Armstrong, a guy I've known for 25 years, was really special. Getting a Katarina to host to do a Penguin Live lecture was huge, because she's incredible. I've gotten to host Mark Calabrese and have serious conversations about deeply underground card magic. Hosting Curtis Cam. That was, I learned some of my first coin magic from Curtis Cam's Palms of Steel videos. And so, becoming friends with John Bannon, there's so many little things and it all blurs together, because there's occasionally someone will be like, "Oh, hey, do you know about this trick?" And I go, "Oh, where is it?" And I go, "Oh, it's in this Penguin Live lecture." And I'll go back and watch it, and it's like, I hosted it. It's like, son of a bitch. I see so much magic that falls out of my head all the time. But here recently, Crazy Sam's lecture has got some unreal stuff in it. Christian Lambert's cold reading lecture is so good. There's too many things to count. I mean, so I don't have it. There's favorite moments that I'll never forget. But no real standout. And Dan hand selected me to take over the lectures when he knew he was leaving, and it was a huge honor because I've known Dan for more than 20 years now. I mean, I started with him at the Magicopolis in Santa Monica, and so I've known Dan for a long time. And he's very knowledgeable and is a great teacher and a really smart thinker and a great performer. And so to have him say like, I've been helming the ship for a while and I'm going to hand it over to you and I want you to host it was, that was a big deal for me. And the coming in to host it was really tough at first because we shot in the old days, we shot so far ahead that I think Dan hadn't been hosting the lectures for like 8 months by the time my first Penguin Live lecture that I hosted aired. And so for us, I'd been hosting for a year almost. Wow. And everyone was just like, what happened? So we had to do like an emergency podcast to like have like Dan explain kind of what was going on. And there's some people to this day who hate me, who leave terrible comments and are just like, bring Dan back. Eric's a terrible host. And there's other people who, there are guests that we've had for Penguin Live lectures who refused to give a Penguin Live lecture when Dan was the host, but have asked repeatedly to come now that I'm the host. And one of the things that I figured out was being the host of the Penguin Live lecture is like being the new Doctor Who. If anybody is not familiar with it, it's a British sci-fi show, and the main character, the Doctor, has this ability to regenerate, and that's how they like are able to keep the show going and bring in different actors. And there are people who swear that this one actor is the best and other people who swear this other actor is the best, and no one can ever agree on it. And so I just have to, I just have to I just have to be like water, let it roll off my back. I have to do my best to host it. I view myself as an advocate for the audience. And so if I sometimes seem like I'm interjecting myself too much, it's because I want to make sure that you are able to learn everything, that nothing is overlooked. Because sometimes when you're an expert at a particular trick, there's things that are basic to you, but other people might not notice. And so making sure that things are taught in their entirety is very important to me. And so I'm pretty thoughtful about when I interject. And I've been working to get better at doing those interjections off camera, and then having the person teach it in a slightly different way. Okay. And that's just a learning process over that. And I think I'm hosting it better now than I used to. But that's just an experience thing. So
is it still like, is it still live or is it like pre-filmed?
It's been pre-filmed since almost the beginning. I think there were maybe only 15, 20 lectures that were actually live.
Okay.
Live casting is, we got back into it during the pandemic, but live broadcasting is pretty difficult, especially when you're using prosumer level stuff like we are. Professional broadcasting equipment is incredibly expensive, and it's expensive because it's very specialized, and that's what makes it so reliable. That's why your television doesn't, conk out on you all the time. And doing it over the internet is even trickier. We're better at it now than we used to be, but it's a better product if we can take our time and film it and bring it to you later. Also, I think that the people we've had hosting it are pretty good at anticipating the questions that the average customer might want to ask. And so there wasn't a lot of, while it may have been fun in the moment, the final product was just never as good as when we can pre-tape it.
Okay. Yeah. Are there any magicians you'd love to see a lecture?
Yeah, there's lots of magicians. I'd love to see Alex Hilsche lecture. I'd love to have Mark Kobe in for a lecture. I'd love to have Darren Brown back to do a lecture. I'd love for Copperfield to lecture. I'd love for David Blaine to lecture. But there's lots of magicians out there that I would love to have lecture. Actually, one that I would really like to have in is Jonio from Japan. He's my beard is weird guy. He was a third place parlor act. I'd also really like to have Simon Cornell come and lecture. I mean, having Michael Feldman lecture or Ryan Plunkett lecture would be great. Paige Thompson would be a fantastic lecture. The list goes on. I mean, there's so many people that I would love to have lecture because there's so many great magicians in the world.
Amazing. Two more questions.
Yep.
Are there any upcoming projects or releases you're super excited about?
Yes, there is one that I've been doing basically since 2022 now. We just filmed it. It's called The Invisible Harmonica by Fabian. We just finally filmed it. I've seen packaging for it. I've seen the prototypes. And it gives you the ability to play an invisible harmonica.
Cool.
And I can honestly tell you it's always in my pocket when I'm doing a walk around gig, because it has one of the dumbest, most surprising things that I do. And it is really fun because I will walk up to a table that I've been to, or a small group at a walk around thing, and I'll go, "I'm really sorry about this, but the bartenders asked me to check your ID." And then they'll act like, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "I'm sorry, it's I got to spot check people. It's just a thing I do here." So I get their ID, and then I look at it and I go, "Oh, you're from whatever the state it's from." And I go, "You're from the music state." And I go, "You know what you can do from the IDs with this?" And I blow on it twice and nothing happens. And I turn it around and go, "Oh, it's this side." And when I blow on it, like a real harmonica plays. And I play like a little tune on a harmonica, and then I give them their ID back, and they're just like, "What the hell?" It is eminently stupid, but gets such a huge reaction because they're just not expecting it. And that is finally coming out, and I'm super excited for that.
I can't wait. I'll be as soon as that comes out.
The other thing I'm very excited about is I am writing books for Penguin Magic these days, and the first one that we have been. This was a big secret, but when you involve this guy, basically nothing's a secret. Craig Petty's book is finally going to come out. So I spent the better part of a year turning a lot of Craig Petty material into a hardcover book, and that's finally going to come out. So I'm very excited about that.
That's going to be huge.
Yep. It's going to be great.
Where can listeners follow your work and stay updated? But probably by signing up at Penguin Magic. Go get the free tricks. I actually really enjoy my emails, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
For spending a time with a little amateur.
No, not a problem at all. I'm always happy to reach out to the community. But people can go to podcast.penguinmagic.com to listen to the Penguin Magic podcast, and they can also find us at Penguin Magic Shop on YouTube and Instagram. Those are places to stay up to date with all of the new things we're doing. Other than that, just go to Penguin Magic, and you can find out about all of the weird stuff that we are doing here in Columbus, Ohio.
All right. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dr. Todd, and this was Magic Workshop.